Hey guys, welcome back. So, I am really excited today to be collabing with Sir Lord of Play ASMR. If you have not seen his videos, go check him out. Let's try to get him to 2,000 subscribers. He has some really cool videos, and I think his channel deserves to be seen. So, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I want to do it with more ASMR artists who don't really do like scary stories on their channel, and just do more collabs. This is my first one ever, and it's gonna be really cool. So, here are true scary stories from Reddit. Number 1, the Grinning Man. I found myself at home one weekend night. My parents were out of town, and I was returning from a cancelled sleepover at a friend's house. The lights were on when I got in the door, and I remember getting a phone call from that same friend shortly thereafter, which would end up being the last normal event of the night. My brother was playing video games in the next room, and I could hear him tapping furiously at a video game while I spoke on the cordless phone. I walked around in the living room and ended the phone call in the kitchen when I remembered hearing some kind of high-pitched squeal that came from the house somewhere, and I couldn't place where it was coming from as it sounded the same in every room I went to investigate. It ended after about a minute after it started, and was interrupted by the phone ringing. But the phone was not in the kitchen where I left it. It was in the bathroom on the counter in front of the sink. I answered the phone and there was nobody there, so I hung up. It was at this point where I heard a dragging sound, like a large, heavy object was being dragged in the attic crawl space above me. I followed the sound as it slowly navigated from room to room and ended up in my parents' bedroom, who still had a waterbed. After the sound made it to the far wall, it stopped and the phone rang again. This time, my friend was on the other end of it. I told him what was going on, and he told me to be careful and call the police. After I got off the phone, I lay down on the waterbed and was horrified to find a body-shaped solid object inside the waterbed mattress and leapt out. I then heard a knock at the door and answered it quickly, but there was nobody there. It was at this point where my brother calls me from his room to check something out that he was discovered in the video game he was playing. And a little more than annoyed at this lack of interest in what was going on, I stormed into his room. There was nobody there. His bed was made, and the room spotless. Neither the console nor the TV was on, and the controller was wrapped and unplugged. There was no way he could have hid and cleaned his room in the few seconds it took me to make it from the front door to his room. I had been alone the entire night, hearing for 20 straight minutes my brother playing a game that he was not present to be playing. The phone rang again, but again, it was not where I left it. This time, it was resting on the kitchen counter where I originally had left it. So I walked through the entire house to answer it. It was my friend calling again, this time saying that the call was dropped for some reason, and he was calling me back. I explained what just happened, and there was another knock at the door. Since I was standing right next to it, I peeked out the window. Within 2 seconds of the knocks, and there was nobody there. At this point, I opened the door and stepped onto the porch to make sure I didn't see anyone running away. As I had a large wide wide open yard, and there wasn't anything to hide behind. I walked into the yard to look around, but didn't find anything. I found myself engaged in several more minutes of talking before my friend got off the line, and it was at that moment where I realized that the place I had been staring off into space while talking were two very large black reflective eyes looking back at me. The figure was tall and lanky and stood only 10 feet or so from me. In the shadow cast by the garage from the front door light, the most notable feature he wore was an inhumanly large smile, and he was grinning with oily metallic teeth from literally ear to ear. Despite me staring directly at him for more than 5 minutes, I pretended I did not notice him. Through willpower alone, made it inside the house without running as fast as I could, and instead, calmly. I remember feeling like if I ran, he would chase me, and somehow knew that he would have caught me easily. I barricaded myself in my room the rest of the night, and did not fall asleep until the sun came up. The next morning, my parents were home. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before, and nothing like that has happened since.
This next story is also allegedly true, and this is by Linear Equalist, and it says, the title of the story is I Lived in a Haunted House for over a decade. When I was 8 years old, my family moved into the house I grew up in. It wasn't an old house, and no one had died in it. And it didn't even feel creepy, just an average suburban house in your average southern suburbs. The way the house was set up, when you came in the front door, there was a hallway with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom to the right. The large living room in front of you with a half wall separating it from the dining room to the left, and the kitchen on the other side of the dining room. Where the kitchen and living room met, there was another small hallway and the master bedroom, a bedroom that was used as an office and a bathroom. And then the breakfast nook leading to a laundry and utility area at the end of the kitchen. My room was to the right of the front door and down the hallway past the bathroom, and with the other bedroom on this hallway used for storage mostly, as I was my mother's only child. And my half-brother and sister didn't live with us and rarely came to visit. The first time anything really happened in the house, I was about 9 and had lost my last tooth. Still being a kid, of course, the tooth fairy was expected. So when I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a figure standing in the middle of my room, I assumed it was the tooth fairy. It was bald and only about 3 or 4 feet tall, about the size of an average child, standing completely still in the middle of my room. I remember my parents telling me that if I was awake, the tooth fairy wouldn't leave me any money. So I rolled over and went back to sleep. When I got up the next morning, I excitedly told my parents that I had seen the tooth fairy the night before. I described what I'd seen, but they told me it was just a dream. For the next several years after that, I continued seeing and hearing minor things in the house. When I was home alone, cabinet doors would open and close. I'd hear dishes being moved around in the kitchen, or catch movement out of the corner of my eye. The most common was often at night. I'd wake up to see a young woman hovering over my bed. She was dressed like the Rosie the Rivetta character from the old posters from the 1940s, with a red and white bandana around her hair and a denim shirt. When I would see her, she'd stare at me for a few minutes and then slowly float over my body and out through the wall behind me. I was never afraid of her, though. When I was about 12, my parents divorced, and it was just me and my mother living in the house. By the time I was in my late teens, my mother was rarely home, and my house became the hangout for me and my friends. Most nights, everyone gathering together to play Dungeons and Dragons or something similar after work. One night, we were hanging out but didn't want to play, so I pulled out a ouija board I'd picked up at the local toy store a few weeks before, wanting to try it out. We sat in my room to play with the lights out and doors closed. And it went pretty normally. Nothing crazy happening for the most part. The only strange thing that happened was at one point we asked something like, "Show yourself." And at that point we heard the front door open and close, and heavy footsteps came down the hall towards my room. The handle of my door started to turn, and one of the guys jumped up and locked the door before it could open. We didn't hear anything else, no footsteps moving away from the door or anything, and after a little while we turned on the light and opened the door to see if my mother had come home unexpectedly. The house was empty and the front door locked. We decided we'd had enough of the game at that point, put it up, and everyone went home. A few weeks later we were hanging out at my house again, this time playing Dungeons and Dragons, though one of the girls that usually came had to work late and had classes in the morning. So she'd said she wouldn't be coming. While we were sitting in the living room to play, at around 2 in the morning, suddenly we heard footsteps run across my wooden porch. It sounded like someone very short or a small child running quickly. Everyone in the room heard it, and we had a conversation as to if our friend had changed her mind and had just arrived, as she was very short, and it made more sense than a child running through the neighborhood at that time of night. When she never came into the house, we all got up to look, and there was no one outside, and it wasn't her car, and her car wasn't in the yard. Her boyfriend, who was with us, gave her a call and verified that it wasn't her, as she just arrived home on the other side of town and was headed to bed. Around this time, the activity in the house picked saw shadow figures with red eyes often in the living and dining room of the house, footsteps and other noises at all hours of the day or night. I started waking up in my room to see hooded figures standing near my window and door. It was around this time that my half-brother, who I was close to, passed away. It was sudden and I hadn't seen him in years, as he had gotten into drugs and my mother had decided to keep me away from him because she didn't want him to be a bad influence on me. After that, I'd wake up hearing his voice saying my name in the middle of the night, often. On a whim one night, I sat down and typed out a letter to him on my computer that was in my bedroom since I was home alone that night and was bored. And now this computer was hooked up to an old dot matrix printer. One of the really loud kind that makes all kinds of racket when it's running. After I wrote the letter, I felt silly for it, and I deleted it without saving or printing it and shut down the computer before I went to bed. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up and my bed was soaking wet. At first I thought my puppy had peed on the bed because he was too small to get down, even though he was housebroken and I'd taken him out just before bed. I got up to let him outside and change my bed sheets when I realized the wet was just water, and it was more than a tiny puppy could have made. On my way to take my blankets to the laundry room, I passed the bathroom in my hallway and noticed the light was on. Even though I turned off all the lights before bed. There, sitting on the counter, was a picture from the kitchen, with the inside still wet. When I was really young, my brother used to wake my sister and I up by throwing water on us because it made me laugh. When I got back into my room and started making my bed, I noticed a piece of paper laying on top of my printer. It was the letter that I'd written to him and never saved or printed. The computer was still shut down and the printer was off, but it had been printed out, torn off the paper and laid on top of it, as if someone had read it. The normal things like this continued for a few years when I lived there, off and on, before turning dark shortly before I moved out of the house for good. The hooded figures appeared more often. I woke up one night with the feeling that I was being stared at, only to roll over and see what looked like a rotting corpse a few inches from my face. And one night woke up to a hooded man standing at the foot of my bed with my bedroom door open when it had been closed before. He held up his hand and a ball of blue light appeared in his palm, which he threw at my face. He and the ball disappeared just before it hit me, but the room was so cold that I could see my breath. On a normally hot southern summer night. When I was in my early 20s, after I moved out for good, I had one last experience in the house. My mother hadn't been to the house in months and was preparing to sell it. I told one of my cousins about the things that had happened there through the years, and he decided that one night, out of boredom, he and a friend of his would pick me up to go ghost hunting in the house while it was empty. We each had a camera, and he had a voice recorder that we brought. We set the recorder in my old bedroom and spent an hour or two wandering around the house, taking pictures. When we got done, we came back to my room and sat to listen to the recording and discuss all of nothing that we'd found. On the recording, we could hear our voices moving from room to room and talking about my cousin's friend's camera had a sexy shutter sound, and the fact that my camera stopped working almost as soon as we walked in the door. About 20 minutes into the recording, when we could hear all three of our voices echoing from the other side of the house, a deep voice that sounded like it was right up against the microphone on the recording spoke, "Get the F out." We immediately obliged. I found out a few years later that my mum actually had several experiences in that house, with waking up to find an older man in his 50s or 60s looking through her closet, or seeing him just wandering around the house. When she'd say anything to or get his attention, he'd turn around and look at her and then vanish. She always thought she was dreaming or something, but with everything I saw over the years at that house, I can't help thinking that it was something else.
Number 3. Never play with an ouija board. This story happened in October of 2004, back when I was still a third-year high school student. My friend and I stuck around the school late at night after our annual Halloween party. We had agreed to try out my friend's ouija board. It wasn't the brightest idea, but we needed a thrill. We found a nice spot under a huge Nara tree and proceeded with our half-A ritual. There were 5 of us, 2 boys and 3 girls. We were all expecting some kind of paranormal contact. Rumors had it our school was haunted, but we've never really experienced anything firsthand. And it was Halloween when all the spirits came out to play. We all wanted to get spooked. Also, we've never seen an ouija board firsthand before, so we were pretty excited. Our school was an old Spanish colonial house built in the 1800s when the Spaniards still occupied the Philippines. We were in a section of the school that doesn't get used often, located beside a creepy old Jesuit house. People only go there when they needed to use the bathroom, store equipment on one of the sheds, or make out with their boyfriends or girlfriends. We sat down in the middle of an open space with only an exposed bare bulb nearby illuminating the surroundings. We were all having a laugh, scaring each other with what-if scenarios. It was your typical dumb kids doing dumb things. My friends, who brought the ouija board, proceeded to place it in the middle of our circle. If I remember correctly, it was the glow-in-the-dark version, which we found hilarious, but it gave us the ability to see what was written in the dark. Not knowing what to do and going after what we've seen in the movies, we all proceeded to place our index finger on top of the planchette. We sat there looking at each other until one of us said, "What's next?" We didn't know if there was a proper way to start the ritual, plus the board didn't come from the instructions, so we decided to just throw in a question. "Is anyone there?" I called out into the darkness. "If there are spirits living here, please talk to us." One of the girls joined in. We clearly had no idea what we were doing. Still, nothing. Not even the slightest bit of wind. One of my friends jerked the planchette, and the girl who brought the ouija board screamed, breaking the silence. We all laughed at how ridiculous it was. After a bit of joking around, we decided to give it another go. We all placed our index fingers on the planchette once more and asked, "If there's anyone there, we would like to make contact." "Don't break the circle," one of my friends jokingly said. "Shut up," I whispered. We were just about ready to give up when the wind started to pick up. The stillness broke, and the darkness around us seemed to move. Just a coincidence, we thought. Okay, don't break the circle, I yelled out. Is anyone there? I was excited. It was like a scene from a movie with dirt and dead leaves swirling around us. Guys, I'm scared, my friend sitting beside me said. My mom warned me about playing with forces we don't know. Did you die here? Were you killed during the war? Are you the headless priest that roams these halls? Do you know Jose Rizal, our national hero? Are you a hottie? My friend giggled. At this point, we were all throwing random stupid questions. Nothing. This is BS. I don't want to do this anymore, my friend said, exasperated. We were all thinking the same. Just then, a group of dogs from the neighborhood house started barking at us through the chain link fence. These 6 dogs were growling and showing teeth. We all screamed and without finishing the ritual, bolted right out of there. Oh no. We didn't see each other until the after Halloween break, and this is where the story gets creepy. One of the girls told us about a weird experience she had the night after playing with the ouija board. She had gotten home late after hanging out with her friend from the neighborhood when she realized she forgot the keys to her house, so she called her brother up, who was then still sharing a room with her, and what he said crept the hell out of her. He swore she was already home. He claimed to have seen her walk in a while ago, and that she looked really tired and saw her head straight to bed. Creepy, but no need to freak ourselves out, was all we thought. Besides, her brother must have just been tired and seeing things, but then my other friend started telling us about an encounter she had that Halloween night. She was going up to her room when the light started flickering as she was ascending the staircase. Your typical horror movie visuals, shrug it off to faulty wiring. But just then, she saw the door to her room open and a dark figure stepped out and stood atop of their staircase. She couldn't make out the entity's face, but she recounted that she couldn't move and felt utter dread as the figure stared down at her. No way, my best friend who just joined the conversation said in disbelief. Something happened to me as well. He recalled that he was sleeping one night. When he woke up really uncomfortable, he described his vision as having TV-like static and a feeling of heaviness surrounded him. He looked around the room, and that's when he saw a bloody charred face with piercing red eyes grinning at him through the window. I couldn't believe what I was hearing because I had almost run in with death that night. After the ritual, I was sleeping in our sedan on the way home after fooling around with the ouija board when I felt our car jerk. I woke up instantly. Looking out the window, I found out that we've been hit by a huge oil tanker. I panicked and leaped out of the car. Luckily, my mom and I survived the crash, since the front of the car was a total wreck. I still don't have an explanation why those things happened to us, but thank God nothing happened after that. I never played or gotten near an ouija board ever since.
Is called The Night in the Forest, and this is by Unsettled Feelings, and is available on the free horror story section of Reddit. Let us begin. So, I used to hear a ton of stories about ghosts, and also watch a lot of horror movies. But since I had never experienced any ghost encounters, I was a guy like meh. These ghost stuffs are created by humans themselves to make money movies about it and all other series featuring ghost hunters. Okay, let's get to the story. One day, me and my two friends visited this spooky forest, not nearby, but we managed to get there just to check it out, as we love the natural atmosphere. You know, giving my lungs some fresh air. The time we reached, there was about 7 p.m. when it was already getting dark, and just to let you know, there's no light source in the forest except the entrance/exit of the forest area. So it was much darker than we expected. My friend had his apple and I had my tab with dual flash, so we decided to use them to at least see each other. An hour passed by having conversation and smoking cigarettes. We were sitting under a tree, as it was thick enough for all of us to lay our backs on it and sit and relax. We were having a good time until we started hearing a sound like two rocks smashing into each other, or one rock smashing on the ground again and again. We were pretty confused. I told my friends that it must be a cat trying to climb a tree, making the weak branches fall off, making it sound like the rock thing. But it didn't stop for like 3 or 4 minutes though. Now after some minutes it stopped for a while, and we were still assuming it was an animal doing these sounds. Things went silent for 5 minutes. We started our conversation about this forest's atmosphere being so windy and cold. Then apparently a rock fell on my friend's head. Wonder how a rock can be up there on a tree. Just in 4 to 5 seconds, a big branch from the tree fell on my lap, scaring me, and once again my friend felt like water drops falling on his neck from up on the tree. How is there still a chance of water dropping down from a tree when the rainy season was already over 2 months ago? This night was clearly not our lucky night, as we heard the same sound of the rock smash again, but now it sounds like it's getting closer. Immediately, without any options to choose, we decided to run out from the forest as quick as we could. We left the forest safe and sound and headed to our homes. After a few days of the incident, one of our friends posted a news story about the same forest. There was a huge tower just like a lighthouse. As said by the post, we saw that tower from a distance, but didn't get closer as it was a rocky area and there is a chance if one of us falls off of the small cliff. So in the post, a boy was passing by the tower, and the first thing he saw was a person, but only his head. The post also said the police couldn't find the body, but just the head of the man, which was already found by the same person who saw it while passing. But the question is, what happened to this guy? How in the world could this ever happen to someone? It can be the drug addicts who made this forest to get high with brown sugar, or is this guy a drug addict getting his head torn off by someone? And the weird experience we had a few days ago in the same forest, was this the same guy doing it after death? My questions are yet answered, and I never visited that forest again, and so did anyone else.
This is a true scary story that happened several years back when I was 13. This was a time when I was growing up in New York. We actually had a summer house in Cape Cod and spent every other weekend there. If we could. Cape Cod is a peninsula off the east coast of Massachusetts. It becomes very busy and even crowded during the summertime. But during the winter season, it becomes empty. The majority of houses in our area are owned as summer houses. So during winter, the houses are still there, but the people are not there. In contrast to New York, there are only street lamps on the single main road in this town. The main road goes from the town center to the beach. Aside from this road, all the others are dark and very black at night. Also, Cape Cod extends out into the Atlantic from the mainland, forming a bay. Cape Cod Bay. Not only can one watch the sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean, but can watch the sunset over Cape Cod Bay on any given clear day. This story happened during the vacation period between Christmas and the New Year. The Christmas celebrations were finished. There was plenty of leftover turkey and pumpkin pie. We got a bit of cabin fever from the Christmas food and family on one evening. My older sister, who is 7 years older than me, 20 at the time, came up with an idea to take a walk to the harbor, which was about 20 minutes walk from our house. The harbor can be fun because we can walk out on the docks and walk among the boats. While I was a bit creeped out to walk around a deserted beach town on a cold winter night, I also thought it would be fun to get out of the house and maybe even exciting. We headed out across the street from our classic Cape Cod cottage. Is it filled with a forest at the other end? At nighttime, I would also have a little fear that there would be a psycho watching from the tall grass. Perhaps he would have an axe, but while it kept my nerves wary, I knew it was my imagination. But still, icy wind blowing on tall grass is a perfect setting for some horrors. Add to this a moonless sky with the million sparkling stars and the Milky Way above, and the horror setting is at level Stephen King. We walked out to the main road, went a bit down the road, and then turned to walk down a side street that led to the street that dips downhill toward the harbor. This side street runs along the back side of a long hotel. It's more like a 2-level motel, painted light yellow, that has a pool. It is well situated in town, so it can be full of life during the summer. On this December Eve, the hotel was closed for the season, completely dark, and several windows are covered with plywood for protection. My sister mentioned that a hotel that spans an entire block, but is partially bored, it reminds her of a horror movie. Like one of those slasher films where the characters make all the wrong decisions and walk into the worst of dark places just to find their worst nightmare come true. At the end of the street with the hotel, we continued to the left, which is a long road, downhill through the woods to the harbor. This isn't a pure forest because there are houses set back from the road with occasional driveway. Many of the driveways have reflectors on a rock, a fence, or just standing on a metal stick. These reflectors reflected back the headlights from cars. I mention this because we could not see any of them or anything. It was a pitch black wooded area, and the road seemed to continue into the black. Come to think of it, we had not seen a single car or a single person or a single sign of life since we left our house. My nerves were on edge. I was only 13 at the time, and although my nerves were screaming, I tried to stay calm because I wanted to seem tough to my sister. The woods alongside the road were particularly nerve-wracking. The trees come right up to the asphalt on each side of the road. They provide many opportunities to hide someone or something. The houses beyond the woods were dark because rarely did vacationers come here in winter. I started to notice that my sister was also starting to lose her nerves, and that's when I felt it. I felt a flush of energy move up the back of my neck. It makes it feel like the hairs and sticking out on end. This is a feeling I get when I am being watched. It's hard to describe this feeling, but I still get it today. Sometimes when someone is looking at me from behind, it's either some kind of sixth sense or it's just my imagination working with some intuition. We were now midway into the wooded area down the hills toward the harbor. I started to lose my shiz and was just about to stop pretending not to be freaked out and tell my sister, let's go back, and she suggested it. She said, it is late, maybe we don't have to go all the way to the harbor. I replied back, yeah, plus it's kinda creepy and dark down there. The back of my neck was shivering, and I felt my body shudder as it wrestled between acting relaxed and flipping the switch to flight or fight mode. My sister replied, yeah, very creepy, come on, let's go back to the house so we can see the harbor tomorrow. We turned around, and she grabbed my hand, and we started walking fast back up the hill. I remember that she held my hand so tight it hurt, and my sister never holds my hand. I can't think of another time she did this, and this is where the story takes a deep dive down the rabbit hole. As we got towards the end of the wooded area, my sister screamed out, I've got a knife and I'm not afraid to use it. Oh my gosh. And she did not lose any rhythm of her fast walk while saying that. We crossed a street now and headed onto the street with the backside of the closed two-level motel. My sister continues speed walking and looks back. She let out a little panic noise and looked back again. She then commanded me, don't look back. I was utterly freaked out at this point. Oh my gosh. Aside from the eerie vibe of the dark, empty street and my own inner panic, I had not actually seen anything out of the ordinary, the exception of my sister completely insane behavior. Then she said, when I say run, you run, okay? Okay. We were almost at the main road, a block from our street, and she said, run. We booked it. She let go of my hand, and both broke into the best sprint we could do. I could hear our footsteps banging the asphalt, and could also hear several other footsteps banging in the distance. We cut around the grass area to a shortcut toward our street and ran through the front yard of our neighbor's house to make a beeline to the front door of our house. We made it which is mostly glass. I was panicking, but not sure if there was anything or if we were just going crazy. It was a strange transition from outside, which was terrifying, to inside the warm lit house, which seemed safe. I was questioning what happened in my mind. I could sense that my sister was also questioning herself, whether there even was a threat, or we both just lost our minds out there. I asked my sister what she saw, and she said there was a man that was standing at the edge of one of the driveways. We walked right by him on the way back. She said that when we were behind the hotel, he crossed the street and was following us. She said he was looking right at us, and although we were walking very fast, he was gaining on us. She explained that it doesn't make sense that a man would be standing out there in the dark wooded area. Honestly, I really don't understand what happened that night. I'm not sure how much of what my sister said is true, if she was seeing things or not. One thing for sure, I realized that I prefer walking to the harbor during the day.